Welcome to Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. It's like coffee with an analyst, or it could be whiskey with an analyst reading a spreadsheet, linking crime events, identifying a series, and getting the latest scoop on association news and training. So please don't be that analyst and join us as we define the law enforcement analysis profession one episode at a time.
Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and today our guest has 5 years of law enforcement analysis experience, with 8 years of law enforcement experience overall. He went from a 911 communications officer to a public safety officer to now being a crime analyst. Here to talk about, among other things, stratified policing. Please welcome Aidan Daly. Aidan, how we doing?
Hey, Jason, great to join you today. Thank you for the powerful intro there. I feel all pumped up.
Yeah, so we got a lot to go over. It was great catching up with you at the IACA Conference in Vegas, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But we have a number of things to go over as getting your perspective and contributions to the profession. And for the listeners, we are going to play a call-in segment, Don't Be That Analyst. So if you have a Don't Be That Analyst, call into the show now. So, all right, Aidan, how did you discover the law enforcement analysis profession?
Well, it was kind of a slow progression into it that started out as a 911 dispatcher for our local sheriff's office. I grew up always wanting to be a cop and a fed. I went through multiple applications, tested with the DEA to go be a special agent. But at the end of the day, that did not end up being where I landed. I started out, like I said, as a dispatcher for our sheriff's office. Through that process, I was also in college for emergency management, sociology, and business management. And while we were learning about fusion centers, one day our fusion center director came into dispatch with his radio, waving it around. He said, "Hey, everybody, I got a radio problem that only a dispatcher can fix." And I raised my hand. I was like, "Hey, I'm a dispatcher. I'll fix your radio, but I want to see that fusion center because it's mystical, it's magical. People don't know what goes on there, and I'm learning about them in school. I want to see what practically it looks like in real life because nobody else in this class has any type of connection to that." So he took me in there. He said, "Hey, everybody, this is Aidan. He's got questions. You've got answers. Tell him what you know." And right then I was like, man, I don't want to be a cop anymore. I want to do this analyst stuff, whether it's intel or crime analysis. I found it was a great place to leverage some of my skill set and my passion, while also being a good fit for my family. And so from there, I started cross-training as an all-source analyst with our Fusion Center. They were really gracious to let me come in when I was off duty or for like an hour or so on shift and just kind of learn more about what they did. When I transitioned to my current agency, I was working as a night shift lead, and they knew that I wanted to do some analysis or crime analysis long term. We had a BMV series. So I put together just a tiny thrown together product, did a lot of Googling to support. I was like, "Hey, here's a little prediction on when we might see these again." And they were all like, "Oh, okay, cool. That's so nice that you know how to use Excel." And thankfully, the bad guys did what bad guys do, and they offended again, and they did hit in the prediction pattern, and it resulted in a couple of pursuits, officers making good arrests. So they came back and they were like, "Whoa, there is something here to this analysis thing, huh?" And I was like, "Well, it's not me, but it is analysis." So they said, "Okay, cool. Keep studying, keep learning. We want you to build an analyst program for our agency." So I did some analysis part-time, doing like our DDAX maps while I was still a dispatcher. I moved to be a public safety officer over fleet and quartermaster while doing part-time analyst duties before getting our full-time crime analyst position stood up about 2 years ago now. I always remember the IACA Conference is kind of that hallmark of when our budget went to council to get approved and that position got approved. So we've been doing that strong for 2 years now.
All right, very good. So with the 911 dispatching, I often talk to folks that went from dispatcher to analyst, and I can understand where that is a wonderful prerequisite to becoming an analyst. Just getting to know the officers, talking to officers, getting to know the data, communications is a good way to get your foot in the door. For you, when you think back at your time of being this dispatcher, is there any stories or is there anything that one night in particular that comes to mind?
Oh, yeah. I think dispatch is a great starting point for analysts because it gives you a good front row seat to what's going on the street. Gives you good fundamental understanding of operations, And also, like you said, it gives you intimate knowledge of that data, which is foundational for your analysts. So they know what type of data is available and kind of some of the systems that it can be used in. But yeah, we took some really crazy calls in dispatch. There was a serial killer in North Texas at one point in time, and my partner and I were on duty when he came through and did a drive-by shooting in our town before heading to the town just north of us and committing a murder and more serial killing and all that. But all of that is not good days for some people, but made for some definitely interesting career stories or party stories, you know.
You never know when one of those calls are going to go through. I mean, it could be not a lot going on, then all of a sudden there's a whole heck of a lot going on.
Absolutely, for sure.
All right. You talked about seeing the fusion center and light going off in your head that's what you wanted to do. And I'm just curious, what in particular did you see when you went through that fusion center that stuck with you?
I really enjoyed like the research and investigative aspect of it that wasn't out on the street because it's an investigative support role that gets to do a lot of technical things, especially when you look at like open source intelligence and social media research. It's the stuff that you see in movies is really what it came down to. I used to tell people, I'm like, hey, if we in dispatch can't find somebody, the fusion center can. Like if you need to drop a helicopter somewhere, the fusion center knows who to call, right? That's who you can go and call in the Army, the Navy, the National Guard, the feds, whatever it is. They were that conduit of information for us. And I think that's what was so attractive is it's kind of this hub to say we may not have the answers, but we've got a partner who does. And then as analysts, there's oftentimes that you get asked questions that you're like, man, I don't know the answer. But it was a great training ground to go, I don't have an answer, but I have a partner who does. And so I got to make a lot of really good connections there. And I think that's what was so attractive because even today, my chief will call and say, hey, we're working, the CID had a question, another agency had a question about X problem. It came up. Is there anything we can do about it? Bitcoin, cyber warfare, whatever, Wi-Fi jammers, something. I'm like, man, I don't know the answer, but actually I do know somebody who's working cyber investigations or cyber warfare with the Bureau or HSI or another local agency that's got somebody who's really skilled. And so it's kind of that good hub to point people to, and then we all can learn together.
Nice. And so as you go into the public safety officer, and it sounds like this whole time you're dabbling, you're volunteering whenever you can in the fusion center, trying to hone in your analyst skills. What were some of your tasks as a public safety officer? And then because I'm trying to get a better idea of that position, again, how it shaped you from when you became a full-time analyst.
Yeah, so public safety officer is kind of an odd career move for somebody wanting to be an analyst, right? Oftentimes you see them go from dispatch to analyst or dispatch to analyst to officer, or dispatch to detective / analyst or something like that. But for us, our agencies at the time was around 45 sworn. We had around 36,000 people in town. We just built a brand new police department and we had 2 civilian public safety officer positions to take on a lot of the support functions of the department. So for me specifically, my portions of that job was fleet management, so fleet maintenance coordination, and then quartermaster. So buttons, bullets, light bulbs, and everything else that it's really expensive to pay a cop to do that you can have a civilian run out and do, right? So everything from, hey, we got oral boards today, can you go pick lunch up, to, hey, we're working on our budget and procurement process, can you go out and do quotes? Or we're working on our state accreditation, can you help rewrite this policy? And so what it ended up being was a really neat window into some of the administrative functions of the town and of the police department specifically. And I tell people now, I'm like, when we go to conferences, we talk about open database connections or making friends with your IT department. I extend that. I'm like, make friends with your IT department, but also your GIS department and also your purchasing department and also your town managers, right? All of those things. Buy them cookies, take them coffee, go down, sit and learn what they do. Kind of like I did with the Fusion Center, because all of that stuff in that time as a public safety officer helps me now as I'm assigned to the office of the chief. I have the autonomy to touch everything from investigations to patrol operations and then rode out with my chief because we got called to a barricaded person subject and we had to go work the command post this week. So I have this kind of wide variety of things, but a lot of my job now is focused on administrative and strategic support. And so I end up interacting a lot with some of these other town department heads or department workers, whether it's purchasing new equipment or managing our technological projects. As the project manager for the PD, I have to go and work with our development services group to make sure that we're getting permits for our license plate reader cameras correctly, that there's not issues, that it's not going to involve, it's not going to be under construction in the next year, or it's not going to be delayed by construction for a year. We might have to move it. Same with finance. People talk about budget. It's difficult to get things, or it's difficult to get things approved. It is difficult to get things approved, but it's not as complicated as you think. And so thankfully, like, we have those friends and connections now that we can go make that phone call and say, hey, we're asking for this thing. Help us walk through this. Like, do we need to still do this? Can we work off a sole source? How can we move this through the process? Is there a grant involved? And now we're helping with grants. And so it kind of helps build that bridge. And honestly, like I said, it goes back to those days in the Fusion Center of, hey, everybody, this is Aidan. He's got questions, you've got answers, and kind of this collaborative team environment. Because one of the things that oftentimes we don't think about in law enforcement or the police department is how we play a role in our towns or cities or organizations as a whole. We often think that we're independent, when the reality is the police department or sheriff's office or investigative function is a part of a larger entity and organization, and they play a role in the success of that organization. And so I think if you can build those bridges and work together, it makes your life a lot easier. It can make other people's life a lot easier. But that's how that public safety officer role really helped tee me up to do the stuff that I'm doing now.
Yeah, definitely introducing you to people, and the more people that you get introduced to, getting back to that idea of you being a resource of, oh, I don't know it, but here, let's go talk to this person because they might. And I think it's always fascinating. I hear a lot of the mantras you hear at training at conferences is to tell people to network. And it always kind of amazes me that folks would need to be told that they need to network.
It can be hard, though, to put yourself out there, but that's why I say people like cookies and coffee, and they're often just as curious about the police department. Because if I'm being honest, you work for the police department, you work for the coolest department in the town. Firefighters are neat, they got big trucks. We're not going to knock on the guys that wear red. But you at the police department work in the coolest department in town. And if you walk over to your town hall or your city hall and say, hey, I'm from the police department, I'm just trying to learn about what you do, you're going to make some quick friends, because people want to know what's going on at the PD. They like to hear stories and talk about kind of your experience in law enforcement. But two, it really means a lot that you would take time from your busy schedule, fighting bad guys, catching criminals, keeping people safe, to learn about their jobs and their functions, because they're very important in the role that, like I said, each department plays in the town's mission as a whole.
Yeah. So you mentioned that took the analyst position. You had an analyst position part-time there at Prosper, and eventually turned into full-time. But you're tasked with developing analysis there at Prosper. And so, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you at this time?
At this time, right when we moved into full-time crime analysis, I was 25.
Fine. So for somebody, even when you started, it is like 23, that you seem to be able to be resourceful even at that young age, and to be a go-to person and people listening to you.
I can only say that I am who I am because of the people who came before me. And I've been really thankful for the chiefs and the leadership that I had to allow me to do the things that I did. When I was at the sheriff's office, our supervisors allowed me to do some training as an analyst, to go over to the Fusion Center, for that Fusion Center lieutenant to come over and be willing to sit me down. It's kind of a small world, because he transitioned on from that agency and is now one of the reserves at my current agency. And so it's really great to see him and kind of have this shared experience together. But all throughout it, the leadership that I work for has really poured into me and allowed me to go and kind of chase this dream to the benefit of the department and the talent. And so I am who I am because of those who came before and who lead now.
Yeah. I mean, you're being a little humble there, but that's okay. I understand. I do see something there, that your communication skills are stellar. And you're able to not only be a resource, help solve problems, help answer questions, but obviously being able to communicate with a wide variety of people is definitely a skill that you have and you're able to use at your disposal on an everyday basis.
Well, thank you, Jason. I appreciate the kind words.
All right, well, let's go on then. So, as you're waiting for that analyst position just to become full time, is any part of you getting impatient? So, are you thinking like, oh, maybe you should try to go on to greener pastures, or are you like you're just locked in it to prosper at this moment? You're just waiting what's going to happen that full time position.
Well, I am really thankful to have a good relationship with my chiefs to know that the position was happening. I got to help write the position and work it through the budget process and followed it really, really closely through the budget process. And so knowing that my chiefs intended for me to move in that position from the time that I moved down to dispatch was helpful and beneficial. And this is where to steal some quote from Stephen Covey, right? We can move at the speed of trust quickly. And so we do have a really great trust environment between myself and the Chiefs. And so I was able to kind of be patient in that, knowing that it was coming, but it was hard in the waiting to go, oh man, council's not this week. Oh man. And I remember I was sitting in the hotel room at IACA in Chicago watching a town council meeting go over budget. And we're thinking it's going to happen. We're thinking it's going to happen. And they said, all right, you know what? Let's go ahead and table this. We've been through a lot tonight. We'll push this to the next meeting. And I was like,
Oh,
oh
bummer.
man. I remember so badly I wanted to mark out on my name tag, not public safety officer anymore. I am crime analyst now. I am CA Daly, crime analyst Daly. But I am thankful that we waited and stuck it out because it is fun to look other places. And I've definitely looked other places in the past, but I can't beat what's happening in Prosper just because of our leadership and kind of what we're being allowed to do here.
No, that would have been really awesome if at the conference you found out. That would have been stellar. All right, so then you get the position, you're full time. At this point, is the chief giving you his vision? Is the chief saying, "Hey, go do"? Like, what are the goals once you get into this full time position?
So our agency, like I said, really strategic led from my assistant chief and chief. Obviously, my chief is setting the vision, and then my assistant chief is the one who's kind of furthering that vision. He and I came to the agency around the same time, and we think a lot alike. And so, through his research, through working with the chief and understanding the chief's vision, they identified that stratified policing was the route that they wanted to take our agency and move to. But there were some things that had to take place before we could actually effectively, correctly, wisely move into doing a true stratified policing accountability model implementation. And so the first part of that was personnel. Like I said, we started with 45 sworn, we're up to 65, I think, now. And so there were some key positions and personnel that needed to move into place first. We had to have a certain kind of number of sergeants. We had to have lieutenants so that we could assign things differently. And so they began working on that early on to build some of that infrastructure. The analyst was kind of the last key piece or the leverage or linchpin to bring it all together. Because once you've got the people in place, then you can bring in the tools and the strategy to actually achieve the goal. So they started with those people, and then as we moved into this full-time analyst role, the chief was, hey, this like the expectation is we are moving to stratified. And so he gave me the stratified policing book. And I remember we'd implemented some tech projects and tech pieces before, and we are all like, man, this is kind of unique. Like, we don't really know what this is. We don't know what we're going for. And he handed me the stratified policing book and is like, trust me, read it, then let's talk. And I went home and I read it, and it's a really short, quick read. It should make sense to you as an analyst. It really resonated with me. And I came back, I was like, boss, this was like reading the cheat codes to a video game. Like, I understand now what you're doing, where we're going, why you want to do this, the value of this evidence-based model, and I can see how it's going to work for us. So we were fortunate to bring in the Santos group to help us do this implementation. And so I got to work with Dr. Rachel and Dr. Alberto Santos in kind of analyzing our data, building some of our, like I said, rules for bulletins and some of those key things. But the whole purpose going forward was, hey, we are moving to stratified. So bring in, build the things you need, start down that process so that as we flip this switch into we're doing the model, you're prepared and ready for that.
Good. And this is your analyst badge story. For those that may be new to the show, an analyst badge story is the career-defining case or project that an analyst works. So first, put in your own words how you define stratified policing model.
So stratified policing is an evidence-based policing accountability model. In like layman's terms, it assigns accountability and responsibility to all levels of a police department. So it's not any one person's job to reduce crime. Everybody has a role to play, regardless of the division or the function. It's not, hey, it's the CAT, quick react team squad. They're the ones who are proactive and going out and reducing crime. No, it's everybody's job and everybody's role. And so it's leveraged on the analyst using the data to say, hey, where are the citizens making these complaints? Where do we see this crime and disorder that we can have an impact on? Of identifying those problem areas, problem locations, hotspots, repeat incidents, patterns, assigning them out so that somebody at the sergeant or lieutenant level is accountable for them. Like their name's on the title of the bulletin, everybody knows they're responsible for it. And then they draft up those strategies, and then everybody has a role to play in responding to those. Then the analyst is that truth teller to say, hey, chief, here's what's going on. And so, like I said, great evidence-based model. I think it's simple to follow and pretty straightforward when you read the book. But I tell people what's great about it is, let's say I win the lottery tomorrow and I walk off. I literally have a bulletin on my wall that says rules for bulletins. And the next analyst that comes in, all they have to do is look at that list and go, okay, if it hits this criteria, then I do this. Here's who it goes to. The chief makes his decision and we move on. We're off to the races, right? They're not going to have to reinvent the wheel. And it's in policy as this is what my job is and this is what my function is. Because I think it's important to define your role. But as this, I know we're talking about stratified, but as this is like my analyst badge story, I came into this going, yeah, I want to be a crime analyst. Yeah, I want to fight crime and catch bad guys and do all that stuff. Similar to the passion that I had for wanting to be a law enforcement officer. As I grew to understand stratified and my chiefs emphasized the importance of strategic thinking, strategic planning, and like long-term goals and development, I really have begun to shift what I do to make sure that everything that we're doing, whether it's technology related, whether it's analysis related, whether it's supporting the patrol function, supports those long-term goals. And so that implementation and successfully, I say successfully, we're always working out kinks. There's always going to be something that we're like, hey, we're going to need to do a little bit better training here. We're going to need to adjust this a little bit more to make sure that it fits our agency and our current needs. But that's really kind of what drove me to go, hey, we are catalysts for our agencies. We can make an impact as civilians in law enforcement and be the reason, that our agencies move forward and can move forward at a lightning pace because we have different skill sets or different perspectives because of our backgrounds, our education, that we can help bring some other things to the table and help us grow as public safety as a whole. And so it's kind of shaped from, hey, we get to do really cool things and catch bad guys to this broader, larger scale of we can make an impact as an agency, as a town in North Texas, in the US, and help others around us do that same thing. And that's where I think that's what my passion is. And it being my banner, my badge story, I'm like, this is what I love to do is get on and talk with analysts and talk about, hey, this is what we did and this is how you can do it too. Or do something similar because not everything's going to be a perfect fit for your agency, but you as the analyst can play a really key role in that.
So when it comes to identifying the strategy, and that's when the game plan gets communicated, and that's when the decisions are made, whether you might use a more open approach with your blasting patrol in that area, or you might do something that's more covert in that area. And so that's where that when you get into that strategic plan, that's where you're making sure that people aren't like fumbling over each other, that there is coordination of efforts to try to solve the problem.
Yep. And that those efforts are quantifiable and trackable, right? You know the saying, if you didn't write it down, it didn't happen, right? If you didn't document it, it didn't happen. We all know, okay, really, yes, regardless of whether or not you documented something, we all know it happened. You just didn't put it in the CAD. You just didn't put it in the notes. You just didn't write it in your report, but you knew it in your head. Okay, great. In the same way, if you're not capturing those agency metrics to say, hey, Are we meeting those goals? Are we meeting the strategy? Are we doing things that move us forward or push us back? You don't identify those things and then track them. It can be really hard a year later to come back and say, hey, we did this thing, or we made an impact. We saw crime go down. We saw crime go up. What do we do about it? Well, we don't know. We just did cop stuff. No. I need you to take the cop stuff and count it so that we know how much time did we spend in areas? What did we do? What type of enforcement action did we take? Did you attend these monthly meetings or weekly meetings? Did your sergeant actually push out shift briefings to you? Did you do a briefing? You kind of check those boxes. Then after those basic things are done, you start going, okay, let's assess the content of those things and make sure that we're not just doing briefings, but we're doing briefings that add value. Right? Don't just put out a bulletin to make a bulletin, right? Make sure that bulletin is chock full of information. Pack that record full so that if they take time out of their day to sit and read whatever you wrote, it's useful and beneficial and actionable and helpful, right? And I'm not picking on one of my officers in particular, but one of them put out and I'll use air quotes, an intelligence bulletin one day, and it had a driver's license photo on it and somebody's name. And I was like, well, hate to break it, y'all, but you can't just call this intelligence, right? Just because you call it intelligence doesn't mean that it's intelligence. This is information, but it doesn't tell us anything about why we're looking at his mug. Why don't tell us what we need to do about it. This is just a driver's license photo for all intents and purposes, please. But like I said, making sure that those actions that you take are able to be counted and tracked so that then you can go to your chief and say, hey, chief, this is what we did and how it made an impact. And not to tangent too far, but when you're able to translate that to the technology that you're asking for or the personnel that you're asking for, it's not just, hey, chief, we did this and made an impact. It's, hey, chief, we did this and made an impact, comma, and if we can add more personnel here, more tools and equipment here, more technology here, we're likely to see a continuance of this type of thing. And that's what one of the software products that we use for LPR tracks outcomes and user usage. Right? So I can see that 78% of my personnel are using this technology. That's really impactful when I go back to town hall and ask for more money for technology with the chief, because I can say, hey, it's not just that we're asking for another $100,000 for license plate readers. We're asking for $100,000 worth of license plate readers that we are using, and here's what we've caught with them. Here's what we've solved with them. Here's how they've benefited and added value to our agency and how we expect them to continue to do so. So those metrics are a really key part of that strategy, regardless of the strategy that you go with.
So with documentation, is everything a checkbox?
No, not everything is a checkbox, but I think it is helpful when you have checkboxes. and I like a good checkbox. Officers like a good checkbox. But occasionally there's the need to have that free text field, right? And so when our officers track time for their ops specific discussions, they do track how much time they spent, what shift they were on, and then their enforcement action. But then they do add notes too that they share with other people. And that then we can go back and keyword search and say, okay, hey, let's see how many times that we pulled over a commercial motor vehicle, or that we saw this person because they documented it in those notes. And so your KPIs too may change over time, but regardless of the KPI that you use, it is helpful to track them so that you can say, hey, this is what we did, how we did it, and how we can continue to do it.
But I do find it almost becomes its own crime classification, if you will, and it's going through that whole way of documenting just about anything, right? Is this like, okay, is there a form for that, or am I searching through all these checkboxes to see if I did that? And it can be quite daunting for someone to try to make sure that they've literally checked all the boxes.
Yes, and that's where your agency leadership plays a key role in not just identifying their strategy, but sitting down and dedicating time and resources to go, okay, we can't track everything, right? Because to your point, we don't want them to have 150 boxes to check and do this. But what are these top things that are a priority to the agency, right? What's that major goal? And then what are 2 or 3 or 4 objectives in there that we can accomplish? So how we're going to do that? Translated clearly to your personnel, then there's no doubt on what's important to your chief, because it goes, hey, you're being evaluated, right? On, did you check these 3 boxes, right? Are we working towards this goal? Did you come to the meeting? Did you attend your shift briefings? Did you do your ops discussions? How much time did you spend in in those types of things. But when personnel are held accountable, then that's another aspect of it. And our chief uses that in like personnel evaluations, even to go, hey, did your time on the street this year accomplish, not accomplish anything, because that's probably a poor way to say it, but were the actions and activity that you took on the street consistent with the expectations of the chief and the goals and priorities that he set? And like I tell people, our strategy is never going to go tell you how to be a good old-fashioned cop. And that's what I occasionally have conversations with people who are a little worried that maybe technology is going to take their job, or that crime analysis like are just a bunch of civilians that are trying to tell cops where to go and what to do. And I'm like, no, I'm not telling you what to do. I'm not telling you how to go be an old school cop, and I'm never going to tell you not to be an old school cop. But let me give you locations and times of day where you can be the most effective old school cop, so that when you go do good cop work, you're doing it in the right areas, and you're not just driving around town hoping you see something, a sketchy car maybe to pull over. You can be where you should be, where you can make the biggest impact. And then, like I said, translate that to the chief and say, hey, officer so-and-so did that once a day. Every single time he was on duty, he's making an impact. He's on track with the goals for the agency. And then that just helps your agency leadership translate to your city manager, your city council, go, hey, no, we set these goals. We invested time and resources identifying what those top metrics were, and we are doing it. But it comes from that clear direction to your personnel, so there's not confusion about which box they need to check. It's, here are the few boxes, check these.
Hi, everyone. This is data scientist Andrew Wheeler. For my PSA is, if you ever think to yourself, can't you use AI to do that? Just stop right there and don't say that sentence. I know that that's more for the managers and the crime analysts out there, but every single time somebody has come to me with, well, can't you use AI to solve that? It's never a good question to actually use any type of even not AI solution. So you need to think about what you actually want before you utter that sentence.
This is Jesus Varela with Rimmon. I just want to tell the world, remember your last letters. ATM, you don't have to say machine. It's already in there. CDRs, you don't got to say records. RMS, you don't got to say system. SARS, you don't got to say report. So just be careful. Watch that last letter.
Yeah. So when you're first starting, what is the main objective for Prosper?
So for Prosper, our chief's goal is to make, like, overarching long-term goal is make Prosper a safe place to live, work, and visit. With that, we want institutionalized crime analysis. So we're not just arbitrarily looking at data. We don't have a whole bunch of people looking at data. The analyst is responsible for looking at data. I know if you ask a patrol officer, hey, well, where's the biggest problem? Each one of them will tell you in their own opinion where they think the biggest problem is. It's like officers who run traffic on a highway and they're like, man, this is where we get narcotics. We get narcotics here. Well, if you look at that information, that looks like a narcotics problem. That's your officer generated activity. Steer clear from that. So we want that institutionalized crime analysis. We also want a standardized response to civilian complaints and problems. We want to use that analysis to build good products to go, hey, here's the areas where we can make the most impact, whether it's with those repeat incidents, whether it's with those patterns. But we want to respond similarly in each time and make sure that we're providing adequate resources to solve that problem. And then the third is to leverage technology in order to make our department more effective and more efficient.
Putting it from the patrol person's perspective, how does that translate for them? Because some of that could be pretty abstract.
Yes. And that's where stratified policing comes in, because with the institutionalized crime analysis and the standardized response to calls for service or citizen complaints, those are both funneled into crime analysis. So chief says, hey, this is my overarching goal, right? Institutionalized crime analysis, standardized response to complaints. Stratified policing is how we're accomplishing that. And so this is what the analyst's role is. This is why we have those rules for bulletins. And here's the literally we have a policy of what our expectations are for patrol underneath stratified policing, that when a bulletin is published, there is usually an accompanying ops discussion where they can log time in that. But down to the officer, they're going, oh my gosh, there's so many bulletins. What am I going to do? No, you're assigned in a beat. Check the bulletin in your beat. There's generally one a beat, maybe, right? If your beat bleeds into somebody else's beat, check the ones on your side of town, right? you'd be familiar with all of them because our town's not that big and there's a good chance you'll drive from one side to the other. But it's literally spelled out like, here's your expectation within that. And then that's where people go, well, it's still abstract. I'm like, well, you're tracking time, you're tracking traffic stops, citations, written warnings, field intelligence cards, and consensual contacts. Those things, we know what they are. The abstract side is that creative problem solving, going, okay, hey, we've updated this bulletin 2 or 3 times. We're not solving this problem. We need to leverage innovation and creativity to solve this problem. And that's where it's a little bit more higher level thinking or more group think to go, hey, crowdsourced thinking to go, let's get creative in solving this problem. And because what we're doing hasn't been working, but it takes that big overarching goal and boils it down to those objectives outlined through our use of stratified policing.
Yeah. Do you have an example of like a creative approach?
Yeah. So this one instance is maybe not specific to stratified, but we'll talk about the creative approach and then kind of how that applies larger scale. But we had an individual who was putting on blast on Facebook or on social media and tagging the town that there was all these human trafficking problems in town, and there's this major like sex ring and all these horrible things. But when we went and looked through our data, we're like, man, we don't see any of these reports, we don't see any of these tips, we don't see anything. And my chief is like, hey, we need to research this. We need to know what's going on. And so, I mean, I'm digging, I'm searching, I'm talking to other agencies going, hey, are there maybe connections here? We're talking to the feds, seeing if they're working something. And we're like, man, we don't know what we're going to do. And this guy's just going to keep like stirring people up. People keep calling us that there's this major problem. And finally, we sat down and I said, hold on, what if we go overt instead of covert? Instead of like going behind the scenes and looking for these things on our own, why don't we just call this guy and say, hey, we're the police. You've made this complaint on the socials. Please give us this information, right? There's an aspect there too where if they're being obstinate, you go, hey, give us the information and stop obstructing justice, right? If you've got all this top secret intelligence information of human trafficking, right, you now have an obligation to tell us as you've told the world. And when we called him, he was really cool and really chill. And he was like, oh man, thanks so much for reaching out. Yeah, here's all the tips and leads that I've got. Here's everywhere I've got it. And he was getting them off some conspiracy theorist site. And so we chased some leads down. And what did we find? Well, there wasn't a human trafficking problem. But that creative, like overt instead of covert way is how we solve that. And so moving to our major threats in town, one of the things that we deal with is organized retail theft. And so one of the hard things about organized retail theft is the criminals look like everybody else, right? They're just walking out the store, pushing a shopping cart with a bag. You can't sit there and go, oh, they were a criminal, right? They're not sitting there dressed in all black wearing a ski mask. And we have a lot of delayed reporting with those. So by the time we get a pattern established, it's generally like 6 or 8 weeks after an incident happened and the pattern is over with. It's nothing else that we can do because they've gone or moved on. And so the challenge for our lieutenants has been, okay, how do we combat this crime where the criminals are nearly invisible and the victims or the reporting parties are reluctant because they're just as strapped as we are in personnel. And so one of the ways that we've done that is like retail partner meetings or quarterly retail partner meetings where we invite all the asset protection and loss prevention and go, hey, we want to help you. We want to take reports from you. We want to come and arrest the bad guys if they're stealing from you, because that's a threat against our town, right? That's eventually going to translate to the taxpayer because consumer goods go up. Like, we want to be engaged in doing that. Please report that. And so we've seen from there our asset protection, our loss prevention getting better about calling sooner when things are happening, maybe a day or two before, within the same week, or even in progress because they're prioritizing time at these stores. Then two, we've set up some we call them retail blitzes. Now, there's other agencies in Texas that have done this, but we set up a day looking at the data going, hey, when is the most likely times of offense? And we put plainclothes officers out and coordinate with the asset protection to go, hey, tell us right now when somebody is stealing. And we interdict them as they're coming out the door, scoop them up and move them on. Then two, through novel solutions or technology solutions like cameras. Businesses can't always share cameras with us. And so we've used some of our technology deployments to strategically place them in some of these shopping locations to where if we get an offense, at minimum, we will have a vehicle, because you can't get into the shopping complex without getting picked up on a camera or a license plate reader. And then using that information to share back and forth with the loss prevention, asset protection, say, hey, give us those known offenders that you've got, because we don't want them coming in your stores, right? And they can't always share with us. And so generally we have to identify some of those leads ourselves. But just the fact that for the asset protection to know that we're willing to get out there and help has been a total game changer in combating some of that retail crime. And so those are some of those ways that then we leverage the deep pools of institutional knowledge and deep pools of law enforcement experience to say, hey, what's worked in your career in the past? What are you seeing here? How do you think that we could use some of these old school strategies with new school, maybe tools or thoughts to get creative and do this? I mean, do we put a speaker out there that says, hey, everybody, this is the Prosper Police. Thanks for coming today. And if you're going to steal, you're going to shop with a cop. Have a great day. Right? Whatever that is, it may be silly, but if it works to deter crime, then I don't really care how silly it is, right? It's accomplishing that goal of reducing crime and making Prosper a safe place to live, work, and visit.
So looking back now, what were the biggest growing pains of implementing the stratified policing model there in Prosper?
It was definitely tough. And we're always working on that frontline buy, because I think the initial perception at first is kind of like I said, oh man, we got this civilian coming in telling us where to go and what to do. When in reality, I'm like, hold on. I like to ask them, like, do you like writing reports? And generally they're like, well, no, I don't like writing reports. I like taking people to jail and arresting bad guys. I'm like, okay, but you don't like going out and just taking reports, right? No. Okay, cool. If you'll go to the area that we're asking you to go, when we're asking you to go there, inevitably you will either keep people from preventing crime or deter them from preventing crime through your presence and not have to take a report, or you will be in a great spot to proactively intercept somebody committing a crime and make that arrest that you want to make. And eventually, right, we'll solve that problem or that pattern, that repeat incident, and you can go back to running traffic where you want to run traffic, going and hanging out at whatever neighborhood it is that you think you've got a crime problem at. But if you'll dedicate your knowledge, experience, and resources to where we're telling you that you can be the most effective, then like I said, you'll have to take less reports. And they were like, oh, I like that option. I like taking less reports. And so some of that is that relationship building with your officers and understanding the why. And so as we've implemented it, there are still some that have difficulty in embracing what we're doing, but our chief has made it really clear of, hey, this is the way that Prosper's going. This is what we're doing. If you don't like it, that's okay. There are many other places to go that you can be successful, and we will bless you and help you along that way. But this is how we're going to do things. And it's so important to him that we actually spend 2 hours in our mini academy for new hires talking about police methodology, policing theory, the why it's important to have a policing strategy before going into what stratified policing is and what our policy is, so that people know, hey, this isn't just some analyst out here who's never been a cop before telling us what to do and where to go. This is a helpful resource that shows me where we can be the most effective and have the greatest impact and really do our jobs really well.
So what are the results of the stratified policing model?
So the crime-wise, it's difficult because I'll say this carefully. We're not running rampant with crime. We don't have super high violent crime rates, which I'm thankful. Our crime rate has stayed fairly steady along in terms with our population. And so our biggest threats have been organized retail theft and construction theft. Again, both crimes where your suspect is generally invisible, or in our construction areas, they're driving one of 10,000 white minivans or passive white cargo vans. And so they are difficult to intercept and interdict. But we've actually recently seen year to date, I think the last time I checked, a 4% reduction in our retail theft, organized retail theft, which has been really good and encouraging, because for a while we were just kind of decreasing the rate of increase, which my chief's like, well, it's still decreased, so we'll take it. We're still increasing. But to even just have that tiny little impact, we're able to go back to our officers and say, hey, what you're doing is working. Don't stop. Keep doing it. You're on the right track, because we're still a growing city, right? We're going to have lots more construction over the next couple of years. We're going to have lots more construction theft. And so we've worked to really be proactive to say, hey, these are the times that we've seen these construction thefts. Go be in those areas. Go walk that block that's under construction. Go make contact with those construction workers. Ask them how their day's going. Make sure everybody's cool. Let them know that you're there if they need something. So there's that element of community policing, but also we've used our technology to say, hey, if we get a crime in this area, then we've got license plate readers, and we can go back and try to identify a vehicle and hot list it and use some of those tools to then alert our officers when those hot listed vehicles come back, and we can make an impact. But I'm, like I said, really pleased that we've seen just a small but a decrease nonetheless in those offenses.
Yeah. So, and then I'm sure you're thinking about what's next for this. Is there a 2.0 in the works?
Absolutely. I think one of the neat things in my job is I've gotten to build the foundation for our real-time crime center and kind of help shape how that fits into our policing strategy and then how we leverage technology. And so we've gotten to build out what we would consider a decentralized real-time crime center. And eventually we will get to add more analysts to that team. And so for me, selfishly, I want to be that director of our real-time crime center or director of analysis for the town of Prosper or the town of Prosper Police Department to not just catch bad guys, but to help our chief and the rest of our divisions within the police department think strategically and make sure that we maintain that high level of operational effectiveness and efficiency to be good stewards of taxpayers' money and then keep our family safe.
Very good. So you get to check out all the new tools. So anything that's caught your eye recently?
Man, I love what I see from flock safety. One of the projects that we'll be working on in our fiscal year 25 tech expansion is rolling in a drones as first responder program. So I'm really excited to see us start capturing virtual response times. So times that the drone can get eyes on scene before a first responder and provide good actionable information, even clear out calls for service like parking complaints or suspicious people or vehicles. We're really eager and excited to see that program take off. And two, there's going to be a community element to it. We'll have to have visual observers for a while until we move to beyond visual line of sight capacity. And so we're going to roll in some of our civilians or some of our citizens on patrol to be a part of our drone watch team and be those visual observers and kind of roll them into our operational fold and give them a non-traditional way to partake in law enforcement. But what really excites me is something like a drones as first responder program is going to be a new novel way that people can stay in law enforcement that may have had to leave in the past. So when you look at like officers who may have been on the job for a couple of years and had some type of major medical event, whether on duty or off duty, that's incapacitated them to a point that they either have to take a medical retirement or they're forced to be separated from the agency because they can't return to full duty. Something like a drones as first responder, working in conjunction with your dispatch and your real-time crime center, gives people with that frontline experience, knowledge, and wisdom an opportunity to still have fun in the operational sandbox without having to be on the street or in a position where they have to take that physical where they jump over a wall or run a mile and a half in a certain amount of time, and still allows them to kind of maintain that law enforcement identity and leverage that experience in their career. And so that's what's really exciting. I look at for the future tech-wise for us.
So are they the ones actually operating the drones?
Yes, so we'll have human drone operators. Eventually, the drones that we are looking at procuring from Aerodome, which just got bought by Flock Safety, have an AI component. Will be their manual component first to have a pilot get a notification from dispatch saying, hey, we've got a drone mission. They'll hit accept, launch it from the roof of the building that it'll be on, and then fly it over to the scene.
Very good. Very good. Very cool. All right. Moving on then. A couple weeks back, I got to catch up with Dawn Reeby, and we did a segment together on what analysts can do. And her big message in that podcast was that analysts can be a catalyst for change. And so when we were in the prep call the other day, you almost verbatim used that similar phrase there. So I thought it might be a good call back to that episode and to get your perspective on this idea from someone that's at a police department doing analysis and obviously is a catalyst for change.
Absolutely. Like I said early on, I am able to do at my department what I do because of our leadership, because of my chiefs, and because of the vision and direction that they've set. But through that process, I've really come to appreciate that analysts, regardless of your assignment, are the chief's catalyst. And there are other things that chiefs can do to help their agencies be more effective. We see advanced education being really helpful, people going to National Academy or Leadership Command College, all those types of things. But your analysts are that really valuable asset because they have unique access to agency data, they understand it, and they're skilled to analyze and showcase where an agency is succeeding in meeting a goal, or where maybe there's some work to do or some problems that we need to address or get creative about. I know in that episode, y'all talked about some novel things when Don analyzed some data in an agency, and through talking to them, they realized they had a mental health problem, right? And so through their crime analysts, they were able to work on building up this program to help kind of solve this mental health or provide better resources for mental health consumers in their community. But as analysts aren't on the street, as they're not out there having to serve warrants or respond to subpoenas, they're rarely having to go to court and doing all of those things, they can be those levers of action for the chief to help say, hey, chief, here is what's going on. Here's what the data says about our officers. Here's what the data says about our calls for service and what's going on. And here's maybe some areas that we can improve on, or that we've seen positive change or negative change, and then use that to help drive their agencies forward. Like I said, even as far as like writing policies or being creative in meetings, they provide this really unique perspective because they're not patrol officers, that they help with being that catalyst for change in the agency.
Very good. And does it help to be in a police department that's smaller?
Sometimes. There are challenges, right, with that, because there's different assets or different resources. I tell people I get to wear a lot of hats. Part of the benefit of managing our technology program is I also have to go move our license plate readers. I have to go help move our camera trailers and all that. People are like, what are you doing? Like driving a truck around, going and pulling trailers. Why are you wearing shorts and a t-shirt today? Yesterday, you were in executive session presenting commercial motor vehicle data to the council, and today you're out moving trailers. And I think that translates that we can all do the job and all do things that help move our agencies forward, or do things for the good of our department. But being in a smaller agency, I am assigned to the office of the chief, and I have that autonomy and that blessing from the chief to be helpful in that way. I think it can be difficult in larger agencies, maybe to have that same impact if you're not assigned to the office of the chief. But I think, like Don brought up in that last episode, you can still be impactful in your division, in your unit, where you're at. And I look at, if you look at maybe, it's difficult to measure, but efficiency, effectiveness of units that might have an analyst versus ones that don't. I know friends at Homeland talk about when they're working with their agents, and their agents like, hey, I just got to work on this case. I got about 10,000 pages of financial records. I'm going to start today. I might be finished next Thursday, next Friday, whatever. And the analyst is like, hey, we have a program for that, right? Like, or we can do some Excel tricks to help make that analysis of that financial spreadsheet a little bit easier. And they go, what? Are you serious? Yeah, absolutely. Here, let me help you. Boom. Here it is, analyzed, done. 10 minutes later, or an hour and a half later, here's 40 hours of your week back. You can be impactful where you're at.
Nice. As I mentioned in the beginning of the show, we caught up at the IACA Conference in Vegas. I want to take an opportunity to get your thoughts on the conference.
Man, I love getting to go to the conference each year. After I went to the Chicago conference, I decided, I was like, hey, I don't mind public speaking. It's incentive for my chief to go if I put in a presentation and get selected. And so I said, hey, if I'm going to this, I'm going to put in a presentation proposal. And so I was fortunate to get to speak at the Grapevine Conference and at the conference this last year in Vegas. And I'll tell you, Vegas really isn't my scene. I have 4 kids. So I am in bed early and up early, and in the middle of the night, I'm changing diapers and doing all that. So flashing lights and alcohol and bars and all that, that's not really my jam. But there was some really great training classes, and I love to get to hear analysts' perspective from all across the US. Because if there's one thing that we learn, it's that everybody deals with a lot of the same problems. And I think about like therapy or Alcoholics Anonymous, right? People often get isolated and they think, I'm the only one that deals with this thing. Well, the conference helps us come together and go, hey, number one, you're not alone. You're not the only one who has this problem. You're not the only one who has coworkers that frustrate you. You're not the only one who's doing great things at your agency. You're not the only one who gets frustrated with this Excel formula because somebody messed it up for you. And now your spreadsheet, whatever it is, it can be that really encouraging environment. And one of my favorite presentations I listened to was from Richard Browning with Army CID. And he was talking about the impact of mental health and peer support for analysts and for civilian personnel. That was the first time I'd ever heard anybody talk about it from that perspective. And it was a really emotional class, and definitely not what I was expecting to walk into and then walk out of and go present immediately the next hour. But I love the diversity of the presentations, because you have everything from like the technical. I know you guys presented on Excel stuff. I know Amanda Bruner and Charlie Gibberti presented on Power BI, to case studies and seeing like those big cases. We don't work a ton of big cases in Prosper, and so it's exciting to go and see how other analysts are adding value to their units through some of those major cases in their case studies, but also learning how to use new tools and techniques, and be encouraged that, like I said, you're not alone.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a big Vegas guy either. I don't necessarily like to gamble, and I don't like live shows. It seems like that's a lot of what Vegas has to offer. But I did have a great time. It's probably 12, 13, 14. I can't remember. I've lost track how many conferences I've been to now, but it's always great to catch up with people. It's like a family reunion anymore for me, seeing the same folks year in and year out. For this Vegas, I feel that Paris itself was a little too big for us. It seems like we were in a shirt that was too big. And I thought, while it was nice to have some of the rooms be very roomy, when I was presenting, I was on a stage, and the back row was like 40 yards away from me. And so that definitely seemed like it felt bigger than what we needed. And I know that there was a reason why we were back in Vegas, and it had to do with canceling in 2020, and that's all. I understand that. I'm not blaming the conference committee or the executive board. I just felt that in particular, like that the Paris hotel was too big for a conference of 800 people.
Yeah, there were definitely some logistical challenges that had to be that had to be overcome. But like I said, I'm with you. It is like a family reunion, and great to see folks from all over that, especially you don't normally interact with day to day. But I think it's also a good reminder that, hey, we get to get out of the office. We got to be a little bit flexible sometimes. We can be flexible at a conference and still get to walk away learning something new.
All right, I'm gonna put your feet to the fire. You've been to the last 3 conferences. I need you to rank the last 3 conferences.
Oh man, I have to say Grapevine, because I'm a Texas boy. Like Grapevine was a really, really great conference. Chicago was awesome because it was my favorite. So if I'm ranking it, it's gonna be Grapevine first, Chicago second, and Vegas third. Like I said, gotta hold out for my Texas peeps, and then Chicago was great. I do love Chicago. I'm not a big city person, but Chicago I can get on board with. And so that's where my rankings fall.
All right, very good. Thank you for that real answer. You didn't shy away from that, so kudos to you. All right, so we're going to take some calls now. We're going to get some callers on the line for Don't Be That Analyst. For those that may be new to the show, Don't Be That Analyst is something that people have seen an analyst do that they really shouldn't be doing. So first on the line is Rachel. Rachel, what's your Don't Be That Analyst?
Don't be that analyst who takes things at face value and doesn't vet or verify the information prior to dissemination. Your credibility is everything.
I like how she enunciated there at the end. That could be it's easy to just hit forward or to just send something, right? It's just a couple of clicks of a button to send out some information through email. So as you're going through the day-to-day, it's just a good reminder of like, hey, when you're the person hitting the send button, you're the person that's part of that chain of dissemination. So be careful of what you disseminate.
Oh yeah, I'll wholeheartedly agree. Verify, verify, verify. I had an officer text me at 6 o'clock in the morning on Easter morning going, hey, did you get this? There's a screenshot, black background, white lettering, and it was like All-Con, U.S. Intelligence Committee, all this type of stuff. And I was like, where did we get this? And they're like, oh, we got it from this other agency who texted it, but it came from their intel unit, so it's legit. I was like, no, man, their intel unit pushes things out on bulletins that have letterhead through an official email, right? Somebody's grandma could have written this and posted it on Facebook. And it's not telling us anything that we didn't already know.
Oh, yeah. No, it is funny that that reminds me here locally in Tallahassee, there were some school threats going through and about school shootings, and you take school shootings seriously, obviously, but it turned out that students were sharing a screenshot text from 2 years ago, and that was actually a legitimate threat, but it was 2 years ago, and everybody thought it was imminent type of thing. So that's another good example of just understand that it's very easy to just send something and without any context.
Yep, for sure.
All right, next on the line is Andrew. Andrew, what's your don't be that analyst?
Hi, Jason. Thanks for taking my call. So, I know as analysts, we all get really comfortable around each other. Maybe we're coming over for barbecues and stuff, but don't be that analyst. And I'm not going to name any names, but Kyle, don't be that analyst that walks by and pulls on that one hair that you forgot to shave on the back of your neck all the time, because that really hurts and it's embarrassing. So, don't be that guy.
Seems pretty specific. I
It
don't know.
seems a little personal there.
I don't know if I have actually any general information other than don't be plucking people's hair.
Yeah, let's respect the personal bubble in the analyst in all worlds. Respect the bubble.
Yeah. It's funny. That's not what I thought he was going to say. I didn't know he was actually going on to assault. All right. Next on the line is Pete. Pete, what's your don't be that analyst?
My don't be that analyst is kind of falling into the tendencies of walking through a request or a product or report kind of by traditional procedure. Don't be that analyst that doesn't think outside the box or find different ways to go about something. That's my don't be that analyst.
Yeah, look at that. That's good timing there. The sirens in the background.
Oh, did you hear that?
Yeah. It's okay though. Yeah. So yeah, that fits to what you were saying earlier about being resourceful and solving the issue, answering the questions, thinking outside the box.
Yep, you got to be able to think divergently. There's always more than one way. Usually, I say always. There's usually more than one way to do something, and if you can't get it through A, then you got to be able to think creatively to get through B, C, D, E, all the way down.
Yeah. All right. Next on the line is Liz. Liz, what's your don't be that analyst?
Don't be the analyst that that remains in their office and doesn't come out, and you can only see the hand that comes out like saying. You just only see the hand. You don't see anything else. That's my biggest pet peeve. Don't be that analyst that doesn't want to come out of their workstation and talk to people.
Yeah, that's another appropriate one for you because obviously that's something that you talked about in this episode is networking and meeting people and getting different aspects of not only the police department but even in the city to really get an understanding of all the different folks out there and how they might be a resource in the future. So I was guilty of this myself when I was an analyst. Man, is it comfortable behind that desk? And it's just easy sometimes to just sit there and just go through your day without having to get up and go talk to somebody. It is just a lot easier sometimes.
Totally. Now, I'll say there's value to shutting your door sometimes and getting work done. I get distracted sometimes. I'm like, listen, hold on. The door is shut. I am in focus mode. I got my music going. Like I am cranking away at a product or a project or whatever it is. But yeah, you got to get out there at network and see people and learn how they work and build those relationships. Because at the end of the day, like we're a family. We're a team, but we're in law enforcement. We're a family.
Nice. All right. Last but certainly not least is Josh. Josh, what's your don't be that analyst?
I would say don't be the analyst that doesn't know their audience. If you're lecturing on Excel, people will get excited if you have the right audience. So don't be afraid to get deep in the details, and you don't have to impress everyone.
So it's always good to know your audience. And I think I struggle with this a lot when I present. Even back in my law enforcement analysis days, I just sometimes in a mixed room, it was difficult to know exactly how much detail to go into and where to spend time and where to just glaze over. And certainly an art to it, but this can be it can be difficult for not only new analysts, but even experienced analysts. It just sometimes it just doesn't come naturally to read the room and understand how much detail when to get into specifics.
Oh, totally, man. I look at in interacting with our folks across the street at town hall, like there's a way that often we talk and communicate in briefing or with our guys, say, hey, yep, we're going to go out. And oh man, that was a really bad decision. That's going to ruin his life. That's really going to screw something up. That's going to jam him up. Whatever, maybe insert your colorful language here, but town hall folks may not always be as comfortable or receptive to that, or it may be a little bit more shocking to them because of the nature of the call type that you're talking about or the offense. And it's just another day at the office for us, and it's totally different for them.
Yes. All right. So that's Don't Be That Analyst. If you have a Don't Be That Analyst that you want to share, please email us at leapodcasts@gmail.com. All right, Aidan, let's finish up with words to the world. This is where you can promote any idea that you wish. What are your words to the world?
I think I'm going to hit a point home again. But analysts are truly that chief's catalyst because of their unique access and intimate knowledge of their agency and systems. They can really add value through showcasing where an agency is succeeding and maybe where they have some work to do.
Very good. Well, I leave every guest with you've given me just enough to talk bad about you later.
Sounds good.
But I do appreciate you being on the show, Aidan. Thank you so much, and you be safe.
Absolutely. You do the same. Thanks for the invite today. I enjoyed our time in conversation.
Thank you for making it to the end of another episode of Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. You can show your support by sharing this and other episodes found on our website at www.leapodcasts.com. If you have a topic you would like us to cover or have a suggestion for our next guest, please send us an email at leapodcasts@gmail.com. Till next time, analysts, keep talking.